So you've brought us this case, and wow, this one, it feels like it cuts right to the heart of where law and tech kind of collide. We're talking stolen cryptocurrency, which, I mean, that's a headline in itself, right? But this case, it really makes you stop and think about what ownership even means in this digital world.
Yeah, you see theft and you think, okay, crime, we've got laws for that. But with crypto, it's like all these questions just kind of explode out.
Trying to squeeze these digital problems into laws that, let's face it, they were made for a world where if you stole something, you could hold it in your hand.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so interesting, right? Because we're not talking about some physical thing getting stolen. This is about a stable coin. It's called Tether. And even before we get to the theft itself, we got to unpack what makes this kind of cryptocurrency, well, different.
Yeah, for those of us who maybe we dabble in Bitcoin, but this whole stablecoin thing is a little murky.
They give like a spectrum almost. You got your Bitcoin on one end, total roller coaster, up, down, who knows, right? Stable coins. They're aiming for that smooth ride. Hence the name, stable.
So less about the thrill of the gamble, more about predictable value.
Exactly. How they try to do that is by pegging their value to something more, well, established. A lot of times it's the US dollar. And in this case, Tether, USDT, as you might see it written, it wants to be worth $1 always.
Which loops us back to, I think his name was Mr. D'Aloia, right? And this whole investment scheme that went south. Seems like a good chunk of his money was in this Tether, and this is where the law gets really, really interested.
Because suddenly, we got to ask this question, and it's a big one, way bigger than just this case. Can you really own something that only exists in the digital world? The judge had to wrestle with this. Is Tether, unlike, say, your house, is it actually property according to the law?
Owning something digital, it's like, I don't know, it messes with your brain a little, right?
Yes,
Our whole legal system, we're talking centuries of tradition, built on the idea you could actually, like, touch the things you owned.
It's truly pushing the boundaries. And you see, the judge here, they had to get creative. They started looking at older cases, things that weren't as simple as, owning a house or a car. Stuff like export quotas, believe it or not, even milk quotas came up.
Milk quotas. Okay, gotta be honest. Not the first thing that pops into my head when I'm thinking digital currency.
But it's a good parallel, surprisingly. See, the judge is looking for that common thread, instances where the law said, okay, you have value and control over this thing, even if it wasn't a physical object. Milk quotas, they were this tradable right. You could produce this much milk, a way to manage supply and all.
So they're connecting that right to a physical thing, the milk, to this right to have, to use, to trade, something completely digital like cryptocurrency.
Exactly. The core question becomes, can something like Bitcoin, Tether, built on this idea of replacing trust with, cryptography, algorithms, can that truly be owned in the eyes of the law? Do you have a property right to, essentially, a string of code?
And what'd the judge say? Did this case make it official? Is crypto property now?
It did. But here's the catch. The judge said, yes, we can treat Tether like property. But, and this is key, it's not the same as owning, say, your car or a stack of gold bars. It's this new category of asset, one that kind of breaks our traditional legal boxes.
Not just a yes or no situation then. Owning digital stuff, there's nuance to it.
100%. And that distinction, saying crypto is property, but a different kind of property, that's huge because now the law has to approach theft differently, how you get it back if it's stolen, even inheritance, all these things change in the digital age.
Which brings us back to the case itself, right? It's not just, is it property, but what happens after that property is gone. How do you even follow the trail in this world of crypto exchanges? It's like its own universe. So you've got Mr. D'Aloia's Tether. It's officially property, but it's been stolen. And now you're trying to solve this crime, but in the digital world. Does anything even translate over? Like, how do you investigate this?
It's almost like trying to track, footprints in the sand right after the tide comes in. Every crypto transaction, it's there on the blockchain, the permanent record, right? But actually making sense of it, it can feel impossible.
And that's where this idea of tracing comes in, like following the money, but digitally.
Exactly. But tracing with cryptocurrency, it's a whole other animal. You got to get into the weeds of how these digital assets move around, how they're tracked. It's not simple.
Because it's not like a stolen car. You can't just look for the license plate. We're talking units of value. They can be split up, recombined, swapped for other cryptocurrencies.
Exactly. In this case, it zeroes in on this really important legal difference, following versus tracing. Following straightforward. Asset moves from point A to B, you're following it. But tracing, that's about connecting the dots, even when that asset gets mixed in with others.
So with Mr. D'Aloia's Tether, how far did they get? Could they trace it?
They did, actually. With some serious blockchain analysis, they traced it to a crypto exchange, BitCub. That's where the stolen funds were turned back into regular money. But then the judge, she had to figure out, do the normal rules of tracing, the ones from the financial world, do they even apply to crypto? It wasn't obvious.
Sounds like we're in the wild west of law here. Is this a case of the technology just moving way faster than the rule book?
You hit the nail on the head. It shows you this fundamental tension. Our legal system, it likes things clear-cut. Common law tracing, it's very literal, like trying to track one specific drop of water once it's fallen into a pool.
And if that drop mixes with all the others, you're done. You can't prove which one was yours to begin with.
Exactly.
Okay.
But in this case, the judge looked at equity, which is more about fairness, less rigid. Equity lets you be more flexible with tracing. It recognizes the value can carry on, even when it gets mixed together.
So even if you can't point to the exact stolen tether, you can still say, hey, that value that went into BitCub's accounts, some of that's mine.
That was the thinking. But here's the kicker. Whether Mr. D'Aloia got his money back, it hinged on whether BitCub acted in good faith. They claimed they had no clue about the scam.
But if suddenly tons of stolen tether is flowing through your exchange, wouldn't that raise some eyebrows at least?
Even the judge seemed skeptical about that, especially their anti-money laundering stuff. He wasn't convinced. It makes you think about the responsibility these exchanges have. As crypto gets bigger, they can't just be the Wild West anymore, right? They got to step up on preventing this stuff.
Feels like a turning point almost. Crypto's going mainstream. These exchanges are at the heart of it. They can't just be hands off.
100%. Okay. In this case, yeah, it's just one case, but it's a sign of things to come. Recognizing digital assets as property, that's huge. And it means we got to look harder at how these assets are handled, the platforms involved, the whole system.
It's like we're just scratching the surface here. The more we live our lives digitally, the more these old laws are going to get put to the test.
And that's the thing, right? Crypto might seem complicated, but it boils down to the same old questions. Who owns this? Was it stolen? Who's accountable? Except now, in the digital world, the answers are a whole lot tougher to find.
This deep dive has been fascinating and I think a little mind-bending. We're in this weird in-between place, the physical world and the digital world. They're blurring together. So how do we make sure the law keeps up? How do we protect people but also make room for innovation? That's the billion-dollar question. And it's one we're going to be wrestling with for a long time coming.